Is your content getting published on your website and social channels and then just collecting dust, and you wish you were getting more traction with it or more out of the content that you're already creating? Or maybe you just feel like you're stuck on that content hamster wheel where you have to publish every single day something new? Well, today's guest, Shaina from repurposehouse.com, talks to us about how you can take your existing content and turn it into dozens and dozens of marketing assets that you can share on social media to drive website traffic, engage your audience, and increase your business performance based on the content you already have, and how you can plan your content going forward to be more engaging and more useful to be repurposed on all these channels, increase your audience, drive more traffic, get more leads, increase your sales, and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm Todd from zeotag.com. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Shaina. Oh, and stick around till the end because there's a super special free offer and high discount offer that Shaina drops at the end for you guys for being a special ZeoTag listener. So make sure you stick around to the end to get that from her. Welcome to the show. And today we have Shaina from repurposehouse.com. And Shaina, I'll let you give a little introduction to yourself and what you guys have going on and how you got started in the video marketing game.
All right. That is loaded. So here we go. I'm Shaina Weisenger. Yeah, I started a company called Repurpose House. We take long form content, any type of content, video, blog posts, audio, ebooks. I mean, literally anything that you can think of. And we chop them into a bunch of small shareable pieces for social media. So we tried to make this process as clean and simple and easy for content creators to get the most leverage out of the content that they have, the content that they're making consistently, because we all know the biggest pain in the butt is not actually making the content sometimes. Sometimes it's packaging it and making sure that it's optimized and ready for all of the social media channels. So like your headlines and your captions and your status bars that scroll across the screen, all that stuff. So we take care of all of that for you. Now, there are a ton of tools out there. You can do it yourself, but there's also a pain point in doing that yourself as well. So
yeah,
you're kind of the one-stop shop.
Yeah, very cool.
Learning the software and then doing it. Oh man, it's a whole deal. So my company basically takes care of all of that. And it's, you submit a piece of content by 5 p.m., by 8 a.m. the next day, you've got 8 different assets out of it in your inbox. So as far as how I got to that, my background is video production for strategic marketing on digital. So I have a company called Wake Brand Media that's been around for a very long time. I've been working with a lot of different really cool brands on content. And what's funny is one of the things I kept hearing myself say towards the end of the journey, well, not the end of the journey, it's still alive, but the last couple of years is I've been telling clients no a lot because they're saying, I need this epic 5-minute video that's highly produced about how awesome my business is. And I'm like, no, nobody cares. Nobody wants.
Yes. I love it.
Disclaimer, you have to have the about me why video on your site, but nobody cares about that until they've gone to your site for some reason to get more information about who you are or what your business does or why you're doing what you do, right? What kind of content are you going to create that you're putting out into the world that gets people excited about them, excited about their business, their personal journey, whatever. So I started to do a lot of value-based content. So stuff like this, a lot of video podcasts I was doing for clients. So it's recurring long-form content that they can chop up into a million pieces that is serving their audience and giving them great brand awareness before somebody goes onto their website and finds out more about them, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, so I was doing that. And in that, I was also chopping it up into a bunch of little pieces just as a part of the package that I was giving to my video clients. So we were doing the square video with the headlines on it and the little tiny snippet from the podcast episode and the captions and the whole deal. And I started to try to sell this whole video podcasting thing to prominent audio podcasters. And it was incredible that pretty much 100% of these people were like, we don't care about the video part, but if you were just to sell us these repurposed assets so we don't have to do them ourselves, we will throw our money at you. And I heard it so many times that I was like, there's no way that this doesn't already exist, right? And so upon some research, I found out that, there's a bunch of tools you can do it yourself. Like Headliner's a great tool. I love them. There's a lot of bigger agencies that will package that as a part of a bigger, monthly subscription that you have with them. But that usually goes in line with some other things that they're providing at the $1,000 plus mark. But there really wasn't anybody who was niching in just, the productized service of repurposing assets. So I was like, well, let's do it. And so here we are.
And so You know, when you work with your clients, like let's talk about like the process. So there's people who are out there creating all this content already, and it's just collecting dust, right? And that's a problem that both of us are out to solve and help people with. And so how do you work with clients on the front of like making sure they're creating the right content, right? Because like you said, the people who come and they're like, we want this epic 5-minute video. And like, I know at my agency, we actually ran tests earlier this year where we did highly produced, very expensive videos for ads and videos for webinars. And our cell phone and webcam videos outperformed by 5 times.
Right. You are not the only person who's run these tests too. Yeah. Like it's crazy. And it breaks my heart because I'm the video producer, right? And I'm telling all of my clients, do selfie style video because people engage with it way more. And it makes me sad, but I'm happy that people are getting more engagement in a way that's way more manageable, right? They don't have to pay production companies or for the gear to make it happen. So
right.
Good for you for doing the test and actually seeing the results. You know?
Yeah, it's crazy. But, but like you said, it's still like it is valuable to have like those core like a culture video or like the about and like just so that once people engage, right? Like, let's talk about that. Like what kind of content that goes out? Like, okay, we know it doesn't have to be highly produced, but what's the actual message behind that content that gets people's attention and gets them engaged with the brand?
Yeah. So I'm always telling people to answer the questions you get all the time by people who are either using your service or seeking out your service, right? Because if you're saying the same thing 100 times a day, chances are there's a ton of people online that are asking the exact same questions that you're giving the answer to, right? So I'll tell people, this is one little like hack that I've been trying to implement in a lot of like content creators' minds is have a running list on your phone of just topics that you can talk about. Because if you're like driving and you come up with a topic, you're going to either forget about it or you're definitely not going to film it while you're driving, right? So just when you hit that stop sign, be like, oh, this is a cool topic. And have a running list. So when you are ready to sit down and selfie style video all this stuff, like throw on a couple different shirts, film it all. Now you've got 7 different videos that you can have like all done properly for social, but you didn't have to like on the fly film all of this stuff and really think about what you want to create. So that kind of stuff, tips and tricks, literally anything that applies to the people that you want to engage with that makes their lives or their business better, easier, faster, more awesome. Like that's the stuff people want to learn about and hear about. Answer the questions that they have in their minds. Don't talk about how awesome you are because nobody cares about how awesome you are. They want their lives to be more awesome, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's so true. I love it. And so, all right, now somebody makes this running list. I love that. I use Evernote on my phone for that, like keeping that list and then go through and have something to fire out. Now they've recorded these videos. So now I have this video on my phone. What do? Do I upload it to every possible video channel? Do we just do one? Does it go on the website? Like, where do you actually promote those videos and how do you get it to reach people?
So great question. What's crazy is I think that a lot of people are dealing with like posting overwhelm. Like there's so many platforms. So they're like, well, and every platform has a certain way you got to post it too. So there's all of this stuff that you need to take into consideration. So rule number 1, try to keep the videos under 2 minutes because the engagement plummets after that. Wistia did a really cool study on that and you just see like the graph goes right after 2 minutes. So if you're going to post.
Why do you think that is? Because this is something I'm interested in exploring more and more recently. So why is it that people drop off the
I mean, we live in the 3-second world. You know what I mean? Like that's it blows my mind, the short attention span. And realistically, they're only going to watch up to 2 minutes if they're even like super crazy interested in that piece of content. Like when you look at your analytics on, Facebook, Google, any of those, if somebody watched up to 10 seconds, like that's a win. How is that a win in our society?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So that's why I think that it's so incredible having like platforms like podcasts where you can be in somebody's ear. Like podcast listeners are so sticky. Like over 50% of them listen to the majority of episodes. And when the majority of episodes are like 20 minutes, that means you have somebody who's listening to you in their ear for over 10 minutes at a time. It's crazy the vast difference between like a social media engager and like a podcast listener. The level of dedication is just a little bit different.
You think it's not necessarily the content substance, but the channels and
Yes.
Maybe what we need to look at is how we're framing and using that content, right? So is it that we should be using 2-minute videos on social to stop people in their tracks and then send them to something that might be longer form? Because where I look at it is like, I'll watch videos for 3 seconds, 10 seconds, or like binge watch Stranger Things for 10 hours in 2 days, right? So like as businesses, how can we capitalize on like, how do we avoid the issue of short attention span and capitalize on this? Like people are interested to binge watch long stuff once it gets them engaged, right? And I think that's part of maybe the flywheel you can talk about where, okay, now we're talking about I have to make a bunch of 2-minute videos and I have to make some longer videos and we have to have an about video. So what does a process look like to maybe be more efficient in creating content that can be used in different ways and, if I may, be repurposed?
Hey-o, there it is.
I'm a dad.
Yeah, I love it. So let's just eliminate the whole about me video. That's something that you need to invest some time, money, energy into so people know that you take yourself seriously on your site. So that's a standalone piece of content. That's not where we talk about repurposing content and stuff. So I would say that Instagram is doing this really well with IGTV. Before, it was a platform where you could only post a 1-minute clip and that's it. It's cutting it off whether you like it or not, right? Now the algorithm is favoring IGTV posts and you can preview that to the feed. So exactly what you're saying, you have the 1 minute on the feed to catch their attention and then they can click through and watch up to 10 minutes of content. So that's a way that you can still utilize the longer form and just tease out the very intro of that to make it awesome. One way to get around that, if like the first 1 minute of the content is not the most epic 1 minute of the content, pull that minute that is pretty epic, throw it to the front of the video, and now that's what's previewing to your feed instead of, the boring intro or whatever it is. If that's the case, I'm sure everything is so amazing, but let's be honest.
I think that's part of the problem when it comes to like, even when I think about like long form content, like long form might mean 7 minutes, right? Like, I think, like Sunny Lenarduzzi puts out a lot of great stuff on YouTube and like her videos are 7 or 10 minutes, but like, that's still like in my head, I have to pause and think, am I going to spend 7 minutes on this right now or not? Right. Yeah. And so like, let's take a break for a sponsored message on Zeotag, but like, that's also where I think like, okay, yes, you can do the 30-second, like in the beginning, like, hey, here's what you're going to find out throughout the course of this video, but there is always going to be maybe not fluff, but like, especially if you have a 7-10 minute video, you probably have several points that are valuable. And that's where a Zeotag player can come into play where, hey, if you use on your website, instead of just like the typical YouTube player, and rather than giving, and maybe you still only get 2 minutes more valuable because instead of it being the first 2 minutes where they barely get into the content and they drop off, it's that they got into the meat of the value and they actually do that value. I think that's right? Like I like the quote. I don't know who came up with it, but it was like the biggest myth about communication is that it actually happens, right? And it's like, because you could be saying one thing and you believe that the other person is thinking and understanding it the same way that you're communicating it, but that might not be happening on the other end. And the same thing goes is like, if you're putting out super awesome 7-minute, 10-minute, 30-minute videos, like people are watching 2 minutes, like let's get them to at least watch the right 2 minutes because that's what will create the relationship between the business and the audience so that they'll want to buy from them. Right. And so it's like, let's skip the fluff. Let's get right to the meat. And I like the point where you said, like, let's cut out that 1 minute that's like super valuable and hooks them in and put that right at the front of the video to get them to watch more. So I think that's an awesome thing. So
and that's what, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
That's one thing that we've started implementing a little bit with a couple of our clients. Obviously, whatever Gary Vee says about content creation is what you got to be doing. So we got one client who is like, it's funny because I see Gary say something and I'm like, oh, we got to change our processes a little bit to, bend to that because I can't not do all the things Gary says to do. Right. So we have one client who I know within a day or two of that post, he's going to hit me up and be like, hey, can we do this one thing? And I'm like,
that's funny.
Yes. But he knows he's the guinea pig. I'm like, okay, well now we're like the little pop-up, like the audio, like sound that pops up with the logo. And now we're doing the whole pull that little chunk at the, like that's in it at the beginning into your clips because they get the value of having to catch the attention initially. One other thing I wanted to piggyback on and having like the longer form content, even if it is a selfie style 7-minute video, if it's full of awesome information, one thing that you can do is kind of like a podcast episode or something like this, where you have a blog post page that you can put that on. You can transcribe it, kind of break down what you're talking about, but then out of that longer form video, take the 2 minutes and repurpose that properly for social. And when I say properly, I mean you have to do all of the things that help you get the engagement. So like it has to be square if it's on a feed, because square heavily outperforms landscape, right? It has to have captions. It has to be like, it's got all of these has to be, and that's really where some of that pain point can come in. But if you want to get the attention on that smaller clip, then what you can do is send them to the full length piece of content on your site. Now you can track them. Also, if you have an opt-in or something cool that pops up, now it's into lead gen instead of just eyeballs on a piece of content.
I like to look at everything as like what I call like the seamless sign-up strategy, where you should really be planning out your content ahead, like, from with the end in mind. So like, all right, if this is the offer that we ultimately want to sell, what's the lead magnet and list building, offer that we can put in front of them that makes sense? Now let's create content that gets people excited and creates interest in what that free offer is so that they can go through the funnel, right? And when when you have that in mind, and then you have your running list of ideas, then as business owners, and who I really love to work with are like the passionate experts who can just flip on the camera and go and talk about this stuff. Now, for their time, it's like, okay, brainstorming stuff that goes into an Evernote, and then 10 minutes on recording the video. Now that's like, and then that's where your team can take over, right? So like, that's where if someone can just put their expertise, document and digitize their expertise, right? Then that's really the juice of what will get the attention and engagement that sets up, like you said, now that they're visiting the site with the context of what you're talking to them about with a relevant offer, gets them seamlessly moving through the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, we have multiple clients that are doing it in a lot of different ways. Like for just a couple for instances, right, on how you can utilize this. So one client, they have a video podcast called Event Icons, and it is a gated piece of content. So every single week they have a live episode with all these amazing people in the event industry. But in order to watch it, you have to give like all of this crazy amount of information: name, email address, phone number, name, blood type, firstborn's middle name, all the things, right? And he was thinking like, this is going to be something that's hard to get all this information for, but it's necessary for him to actually like filter his leads. But he was using one, like out of every episode, again, one a week, he was repurposing one little 2-minute clip into all the different formats. And we do image quotes too. So he got image quotes out of that with the picture of the awesome person who said it on there. And out of that, like their opt-ins to this piece of content increased by 300%. Like just from previewing it. So nobody, like, that's crazy town. Their site visits skyrocketed. Like it was nuts. So like they're using it for a gated piece of content. Then we have people who are looking at like blog posts from way back when that are still evergreen, but they get a lot of site opt-ins on those. Like they did at least when they were really promoting it. And they're like, well, I can only post the link so many times, right? Well, now, right, because it's like, and also links don't do well on Facebook. So realistically, it's probably not going to do much. But they're like, we don't want to put money into advertising this anymore. But we'll do text motion videos out of 100 words of the blog post. So they look like one of those like Goldcast videos or the BuzzFeed videos, right? And then that drives them back to that original blog post. And now they're seeing opt-ins start to skyrocket again because they know the piece of content works. Right. It's just a matter of how do you get fresh pieces of it in front of people in a way that translates on social. Like something traditionally that's text does not do well on Facebook or Instagram. Like how, So that's been super, super helpful for people who have created really great pieces of content that are just sitting there collecting dust that are now like crushing it again for them.
I love it. And so you touched on the Gary passion there, and I did mention document. So I'd love now, I'm selfishly going to bring this up as a topic to get your insights on, because you're obviously super into this. I think we're really kind of cut from the same vein here. But he always preaches about this, like, document, don't create, right? And on one hand, I do love it. And it's kind of what we're talking about. Like, let's document, like, what we're talking about. Like, here's the ideas. But on the other hand, I think there's a misconception there, because you really have to make sure that your content aligns with your audience. Like what you talked about in the beginning is, what's the audience looking for? What questions do they have? Like, that's what we have to focus on. And I think too many people hear this document, don't create, and they start documenting their daily journey as a business owner, which would be cool if A, you're trying to make a reality show like he is, or B, that your audience is also business owners and that's what you sell to them where it lines up. But where I've seen too many people failing is that they sell something not to business owners, and like, they sell something, they sell photography services to brides or whatever. And like, you're documenting your journey as a business owner of a marketing agency doesn't line up with what brides are looking for in a photographer. Like, they don't care. Right. So I think what we need to frame that conversation as is more of like documenting your expertise and how it serves your audience. And back to what you said in the beginning is like making sure that it's helpful and gets them engaged, and then leads them to that next step. Like, it starts with that first 5 seconds that buys you the next minute, that buys the next 3 minutes, that buys the next 7 minutes, that buys the email opt-in, that buys the nurture sequence, that, and it's just, it's all micro commitments from start to finish, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that just to add some clarity, Gary has like a team of like 31 people who manages all of this stuff too. So anybody who's listening or watching, like, just know that that is an unrealistic scope if you don't have that team. But what I think he's really meaning is like, when you have conversations with your clients, if you are consulting, if you are doing that kind of stuff, that's a document, don't create. Because like, I can sit down with a client and we can go back and forth. And what's cool about that is I get very specific case specific questions, right? And that may or may not apply to certain people, but it may be something unique that I didn't think about initially to talk about on camera, right? But now I have this 45-minute consult that can be used over and over and over again. I'm sure there's going to be at least 15 small 1-minute clips in there that I can yank out and now push. And now it looks like me offering expertise to another person. It's not just me in front of a camera where they're like, does she have clients? I don't know. There's some evidence of a human that is at least taking my advice.
That's a major differentiator in today's like guru world, right? I mean, the news feed is just filled with these people who claim to be experts. And they're just selling courses to people to learn how to sell courses to people to learn how to sell courses to people.
Exactly. It's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, so I like that. That's actually a good idea to show the actual clients with you that it's real.
This person trusts me,
Yeah. So we've talked about like planning and creating new stuff, but I like your website says something about like this. Your content is collecting dust, right? So what can people do like if they have a library of like, let's say they didn't get into the video game yet, and that they've got a ton of blog content because maybe they're into content or inbound marketing. So they've been blogging for a few years, or at least sporadically, where they have that kind of stuff. Or maybe they've been a guest on a few webinars or podcasts like this, but didn't host them themselves. Like if they have some stuff that's collecting dust, like what's the opportunity there and how do they go about prioritizing what they should do?
That is a great question. And that's one of the first things I start people on. So like, it's probably the most painful part of it. Honestly, when we started Repurpose House, we had a lot of churn based on this one piece of people not being able, they're like, I don't have time to go through all of my content, right? So that's why we introduced the curating piece where we'll go through it for you, because honestly, like I don't want to go through all my 1-hour episodes of my own stuff, let alone everybody else. But if you are going to go and take your first step into going into your existing content to the archives and dusting everything off, there's a spreadsheet that I will send you and anybody can use it, download it, whatever. It's basically like, okay, there's a tab on the bottom where it's the blog. There's a tab on the bottom where it's the podcast. And you go through, find the links to each of them, and just go through each blog. Let's talk about blog posts, and find little 100-word snippets. 100 words when you transfer into video. There's a cool program called wave.video that is amazing, and it basically creates those Goalcast type videos for you. About 100 words comes out to about 90 seconds of video, depending on how fast or slow the text is on screen, right? So think about the 100 words, think about if it resonates. And then on the bottom, you're going to put like a little call to action. So on this sheet, you can literally go through one blog post, come up with like 4 or 5 different pieces of repurpose assets that will then drive back to that thing. But what some people do wrong, I guess, is that they'll go through and they'll find that one little clip and then they'll be done. And then they'll wait until the next time they have to create a piece of content. And then they'll find another blog post. It's like, just either you do the due diligence or have a VA do the due diligence, or somebody, right? Just sit there, like grit and bear through the whole piece of content, find as many pieces of gold as you can, and make that your task like every Monday or whatever for an hour and a half. And you'll be surprised that after you do it a handful of times, you've got this well of stuff that you can now pull from that you don't have to like consistently go back. At some point, all of your content should really have in and out points for video, or the 100 words for your blog, or, whatever it is that you're trying to repurpose. You should have most of it pretty much chopped apart and ready to be repurposed at that point,
So what do you think about, so we're creating this massive library, like it doesn't take more than a handful of weekly videos to be like, have a huge backlog of social content to promote, right? So I'm a huge fan of like Meet Edgar and these tools that let you have a library that just, it will pull out of categories and promote. Like, how do you recommend people use this huge library of content that they're creating?
Definitely calendaring it out like you are. Yeah. To think that you're going to physically post consistently is ridiculous because life, So utilize one of these platforms. Like Edgar's great, Buffer's great, Agora Pulse. There's tons of them out there, and all of them kind of have their highs and their lows depending on kind of what you need. But just know that there are limitations on some of them. Like a lot of them won't post to your personal pages. So, or if they do, they're limited on what they will post. So just knowing which ones do what and what you really need them for is going to be really helpful. Also making sure that you are on one post, make sure that it's formatted for all of the different platforms. Like if you're going to pull a 2-minute clip out of a video, make sure that it's square for your feeds, make sure that it's, vertical for your IGTV and for your stories, because it's not just one place you post it. Like you can post it in all these different places, different days of the week. Staggering your content is going to be huge because you're getting more eyeballs on it at different times. Also, think about the mentality as well. Like my mentality is a lot different when I'm on Instagram than when I'm on LinkedIn. So a piece of content may or may not speak to me depending on what platform I'm on. So making sure that it goes on every platform on different days of the week will really help engage your audience a little bit more, or at least gives you more chance to, right? But then another thing to think about is the copy that you put with the content on the platforms, because every platform is different. So making sure you adjust your copy. When I say copy, it's the text that you're going to type in. I know you know this, but for whoever is watching or listening, like it's the text that you put above the actual video that's in your post. So making sure that really...
We'll overlook that. It's like absurd to me, even when it comes to graphics, where they're like, "What you like? Here's a picture. Like here, post this picture." Like a client will shoot something like, "Hey, post this." Like, well, we need copy too. Like it can't just be a picture or just a video. Like we have to actually write something, but you also you touched on like limitations before on like how many times can we share the same thing or get the most out of it? Like if you have a piece of content that is relatively evergreen, like how often or how much should someone be promoting that? Like, should you only promote something for a month, or put it like, how often does existing content get put into a promotional schedule, do you think?
Well, here's what I would say. If you have one blog post, I wouldn't make that your 4 days a week post for the next month. You know what I mean? Like you can still circle back to it, maybe give it a minute. But also like we were saying, you don't just need to pull one piece of content out of, like, literally 100-word snippet on your blog post could be enough content for a whole week's worth of posts, like on every single platform. You turn it into little, like the image cards too, that are 25 words. That's maybe a cool stat like that can cover your whole week. So if you are able to get multiple pulls out of that, like, okay, you may be driving to the same piece of content, but nobody knows that if it's a different piece of content that you've created for social, So,
like long term though, like, okay, we publish something new, we create a bunch of stuff, we promote it this week, but like in 6 months, this is where I find like misconceptions for clients is like, to the client or the business, they're like, that's old. We published that 6 months ago. But
we already did that. Yeah.
But in reality, no one's paying attention to you that much. Like they're not going to notice that you reposted the same thing every 10 days, especially when you're rotating it in different, like you have different angles and positions and quotes like you mentioned. But I think the other thing is like, you're also gaining and building a new audience, hopefully, right? If you're doing this, that's the objective. So the people who follow you today didn't follow you a month ago, 3 months, 6 months ago. So how do you kind of treat that like long-term promotion of pieces of content?
That's a great question, because the thing that I hear the most often from podcasters specifically is, oh, everybody already heard that episode. Everybody? What? Yeah. You have an incredible listener base. Like everybody already heard that. And it's so asinine.
And they will be able to recite the whole thing, right?
Right. And I'm like, stop it. So especially like if you have a podcast that has guests on it, and granted, this applies to literally any piece of content. If you have something crazy cool that you wrote 6 months ago or recorded 6 months ago, and this works super well with podcasts because with guests and stuff like that, like you can constantly send traffic to that. Like if I had Gary on my podcast a year ago, I would be repurposing that piece of content at least once a month. And I would be sending people to it because I can guarantee you that when I tag him or hashtag all this stuff, whatever, you're going to get new eyeballs on it, new listeners. And what's cool about it is that you have people who aren't even subscribed to your podcast, blog, whatever. You get a whole new listener or viewer base to then sign up for the previous episodes as well as your new ones. Also, you have people who are like, if they're looking at your new stuff, maybe they didn't hear or see any of your content from 6 months ago. So now you're reminding them of older pieces of content you've created that they can share if they think is cool. So, I mean, that's just it. The whole collecting dust thing blows my mind because people just view it a lot of the times as it's old content. And it's like, it's not, unless it's very dated, but most times it's not, you know?
I find that like, I've even had that conversation with like the exit intent pop-ups that we'll put on websites with a lead magnet where clients will say like, we've had that on our site. I see it every week when I go and like, we need something new. I'm like, nah, the people visiting your site are there for the first time. Like, yes, you
Right.
see it all the time, but like, I don't care what you see. It's about, getting people in, the new people into the ecosystem of the brand. So
yeah, it's true.
We're pushing 30 minutes here and I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you so much for coming on here. And where can people find you? And, is there anything that you have? You mentioned a spreadsheet before, but where can people learn more and get more engaged with you?
Yeah, you got it. So repurposehouse.com is the site. We just started this new intro product where instead of just signing up for one of the subscriptions, you can actually do kind of like a one-time package with us. Like every ticket is 8 assets and you can go in, give us your logos, give us your like information video, whatever it is that you want to have repurposed. And we'll do a one-time ticket for you for $49, which is a great way to see how much stuff you get out of overnight delivery. So we'll go ahead and have the link for that. We'll be able to get you guys signed up for that whole deal. Awesome. But also I'm happy to do a 200 off setup too. So if anybody wants to sign up for Repurpose House, we'll get you your happy little code. Make sure that you put his code in there and you guys will get 200 off setup on either plan.
That's awesome.
Yeah, outside of that, like we're on social, Repurpose House Co. And then I'm on social all over as Shaina Weisenger. I do a lot of dog posts on Instagram. So if you want business stuff, find me on LinkedIn.
That's funny. And I can attest to you being like hyper responsive because that's how we met was on Instagram. I heard you on the Hustle and Flowchart podcast, tagged you in the episode. And that's kind of how we start our conversation. And that's how you grow a business through social, right? Is putting out good stuff and people find you and get engaged and grow. So thank you so much. I could honestly talk to you all day and night about this stuff, but I really appreciate you coming on. This is great. Everybody check out repurposehouse.com and we'll see you on the next episode.